Welcome back to Tipton Bros. Today, we'll be discussing some of the most unusual surplus pistols ever constructed. As per usual, I will try my best to diversify the list and provide you with choices you may not have considered. I will continue creating this type of content in the future, so let me know what you think down in the comments. Again, I am no expert and never claim to be. And before we start this video, please excuse any errors I may make, as information is sparse and conflicting. Let's get into it. Starting our list out at number 5, we have selected the Gliscente Model 1910. The Gliscente platform was originally drafted in roughly 1903, as it was rumored that the Kingdom of Italy was in search of a replacement for the aging Model 1889 Bodeo revolver. Finally, after several revisions, in 1908, the first pattern of Gliscente pistol went into production. Given the title Model 1906, this handgun fell well short of expectations. Chambered in 7.65 by 22mm, this anemic, bottleneck cartridge left the Royal Italian Army with a sour taste in their mouth. After its trial, the Italian Army requested it be bulked up and fire rounds similar in power to the German 9x19 Parabellum. The Brescia Metal Company obliged, returning with a redesigned pistol, newly branded the Gliscente Model 1910. This lock-breech handgun was accepted by the Royal Italian Army and swiftly went to production. Being produced from 1910 until approximately 1916, a total of 33,000 or so Gliscente Model 1910s would be completed. While the Gliscente pistol did see service in both world wars, it was astonishingly fragile, as well as being quite finicky when cycling. By the same token, the Model 1910 was greatly underpowered, firing 9mm Gliscente, which in every practical sense was a downloaded 9x19 Parabellum. The issues were apparent, and the writing was on the wall for this unusually strange sidearm. The Italians would begin phasing the Gliscente pistol out, finding a cheaper and more reliable alternative in the Beretta Model 1915. Years later, the Beretta Model 1934, which we have previously discussed, was declared the official service pistol of the Royal Italian Army. That same year, the Gliscente pistol was declared obsolete. But in my opinion, one could certainly make the case that the Gliscente platform was obsolete since its inception in 1903, and certainly so by the time of production in 1910. While I don't expect any of you to go out in search of a Gliscente, I will provide you with an estimated price range. While extremely uncommon in the US, a Gliscente Model 1910 will regularly cost between $1,800 and $3,000, depending on condition. Although I don't plan on ever obtaining an example, I do find the development and usage of the Gliscente interesting to say the least. Now, on to our next spot. Taking our fourth spot, the Model 1903 Clement pistol. Designed by Charles Clement around the turn of the century, the Model 1903 was a further evolution of the previous 1902 Clement, the 1902 pattern being the original. Data on the Model 1903 is thin, and there are no known instruction manuals, parts lists, or diagrams available, so again, I'd like to apologize for any errors I may make. The Model 1903 Clement was also known as the Type 1 of the 1903 pattern, and is a slightly downscaled version of its predecessor, the 1902. The Type 1 was chambered in a proprietary cartridge known as 5mm Clement, that while small was surprisingly effective. This was due in part to the 5mm bullet being unstable in flight, having the propensity to tumble, and while this may have aided in a self-defense scenario, it was a detriment in the accuracy department. The profile of the Clement pistol was a spinning image of the FN Browning 1900, even having a few mechanical similarities. Despite there being no record of production time, it is estimated that the production of the 1903 Clement pistol started sometime between early 1903 and October of 1906, when an advertisement for the handgun is first recorded. Commercially, the Clement line of pistols was a failure. Even when Charles Clement began moving towards a more streamlined design, such as the model of 1912, the competition was far too overwhelming. Archivists have determined, through piecing several examples together, that approximately 1,500 of the Type 1 1903 Clement pattern pistols were completed. At serial number 1500, the 1903 Type 2 went into production, solving lingering mechanical issues that hindered the first pattern. Mainly, that a milled channel on the Type 1 pinched the recoil spring and its guide rod, not allowing it to extend the full length of the gun. This was quickly resolved on the Type 2 by redesigning the receiver housing. From what I was able to gather, the Clement pistol, particularly the one chambered in 5mm Clement, was rather easy to shoot, soaking up what little recoil there was. Other than that, I was unable to locate any first-hand accounts with the Clement 1903 pistol. I would speculate that it functioned well, as it had a proven design and was built to a high standard. Aesthetically, the Clement model of 1903 is rather clunky, and at least from a visual standpoint, top-heavy. While its shape was somewhat bland for the time period, the effort that went into this pistol was anything but, having a deep blue finish, a polished trigger, and bolt. Additionally, the first pattern of 1903 Clement pistols used elegantly checkered grips. Later down the line, Clement would switch to rubberized grips that showcased the Clement logo, a CC monogram laid horizontally. The price range for the Clement Model 1903 tends to stay around the $2,000 mark, although I have seen some go as low as $800. While many of us may never own a Clement pattern pistol, you now hopefully have the knowledge to identify one if an example were to be presented. Coming in third on our list, we have chosen the Mannlicher Model 1901. Being perhaps the most simplistic design on the list, as well as popular, the Mannlicher Model 1901 served the Austro-Hungarian Empire well, despite never being adopted. Designed by Ferdinand Mannlicher, this was an unassuming blowback handgun, chambered in 7.63mm Mannlicher, a straight-case cartridge that carried a roughly 85-grain projectile, traveling at around 1,070 feet per second. Fed via 8-round stripper clip, this sidearm was quick to reload. For its time, this handgun was no slouch. Used primarily in World War I by officers of Austria-Hungary through private purchase, the Mannlicher Model 1901 was well liked. Ironically, the Model 1901 was rejected by Austria-Hungary in the 1904-1905 pistol trials. This sleek handgun only saw adoption by one country, Argentina, who designated it the Modelo 1905. The Mannlicher 1901 was produced from 1901 until 1903, where 4,000 would see the light of day. Although 4,000 pistols are a drop in the bucket for some manufacturers, this was more than enough to please Ferdinand Mannlicher, who saw this as his masterpiece. The model of 1901 was marketed as a delayed blowback, and technically it was, but in a practical sense, it was closer to simple blowback, with a delaying mechanism serving basically no purpose. As far as handling goes, you would be hard-pressed to find a better shooting handgun on this list. The Mannlicher Model 1901 lent itself well to accurate shooting, being built like a target pistol. It fit the hand well, and possessed a lofty front sight blade that complemented the long sight radius. This handgun, by far and away, is the sleekest firearm I have presented, having clean, decisive lines, and an overall appealing shape. The Mannlicher Model of 1901 is still a hen's tooth in comparison to other handguns of the period, and can run upwards of $2,500 for an excellent example. While owning one may be out of the question for me, I still appreciate the design and story of the Mannlicher Model 1901. Holding our number 2 spot, one of my personal favorites, the Frommer Model of 1910. The predecessor to the Frommer Stop, the Model 1910 was in terms of early semi-automatic pistols, a success. With a little less than 10,000 handguns being completed, from 1910 to 1912, the Frommer Model of 1910 was on the brink of becoming a household name. But a few major issues held this awkward sidearm back. First and foremost, to say the Model 10 is poorly designed is an understatement. This handgun is an ergonomic nightmare, possessing one of the most curious silhouettes I've ever seen on a handgun. And despite being shaped like a cinder block, it was renowned for being a comfortable sidearm to not only handle, but shoot. While at the time of production, this may have been a major weak point, today, the bizarre form of the Frommer Model 10 is what makes it so attractive. Secondly, the Frommer Model 10 was chambered in 7.65 by 13mm, a cartridge that propelled a 71-grain projectile at about 820 feet per second. Even by the standard of the early 1900s, this cartridge was pitiful. Just for comparison, that places the 7.65 by 13 at roughly 80% of the power of 32 ACP. While the firearm itself was underwhelming, the mechanism it used was not. Rudolf Frommer favored a long recoil, lock breech design that he had used in previous platforms up until this point. The Frommer Model 1910 was also the first of Rudolf's designs to incorporate a detachable box magazine as well as grip safety. Like any good firearms designer, he would learn from his mistakes. In the 1903 Swedish pistol trials, the Frommer Model 1901 would outperform its competitors, but would be rejected on the basis that it did not have a removable magazine. This was just one of many lessons Frommer would take to heart that would lead him to being one of the most prolific firearms designers of the 20th century. These experiences would culminate to form the Frommer Model 1910, and later, as previously stated, the Frommer Stop, also referred to as the Frommer Model 1912. The Model 1910 would be the last pistol to follow this design pattern and would soon die out. There is very little information floating around about this handgun, so if you notice something I may have missed, please feel free to let me know down in the comments. The Frommer Model of 1910, while rare, do still pop up at auction houses. On average, a run-of-the-mill example will cost around the $2,000 range. This stands alone on this list as a pistol I one day hope to own. Its unfamiliar profile is what draws me, as it does with many others. Now, for our honorable mention. For our honorable mention, we have chosen the Chalbaud Model of 1903. I'm going to be using the English pronunciation of the word, as I wouldn't dare try the Danish. I apologize to any Danes watching this video. The Chalbaud pattern of pistol was invented by Jens Theodor Sur Chalbaud. I could not find any other information on Jens Chalbaud besides the line of pistols that bear his name. Manufactured by a company in Copenhagen, Denmark, that was founded in 1896, known as Dansk Rækkerifle Syndikat, or DRS for short. This company was best recognized for producing the Madsen light machine gun, and later down the road, the LAR assault rifle. Unfortunately for Chalbaud, his line of handguns would not become profitable for DRS. The model of 1903 Chalbaud would be produced from 1903 until 1908, and in that 5-year production run, it is estimated that less than 1,000 total pistols were finished. Employing a lock breech design with an internal hammer, the design of the model 1903 was modest yet very effective. In the book, Pistols of the World, 1st edition, by Ian V. Hogg and John Weeks, it is described as well made and reliable. The model of 1903 Chabot also had a Browning-style stirrup-shaped connector in addition to a recoil spring in the upper portion of the slide. Mechanically, the model 1903 Chabot had one other neat feature: a second magazine detent, allowing for the pistol to be loaded manually for single fire if the magazine was not fully seated. And as one might expect, if the magazine is pushed to the second detent, the handgun would cycle normally. While the Chabot did not have the most attractive lines for a handgun or an ergonomic grip, it is an outstanding sidearm with many useful features, and it is unfortunate for Jean Chabot and the firearms community that these quality sidearms did not gain notoriety on a larger scale. The last Chabot pistol to go up for auction fetched a jaw-dropping $28,000, so unless you plan on living out of a cardboard box for the foreseeable future, I don't think you'd have an interest in this pistol. Now, on to our top spot. Snagging our top spot, the most iconic handgun on the list, the Borchardt Model 1893. Designed by Hugo Borchardt in 1893, this beautifully crafted handgun holds the distinction of being the first commercially viable semi-automatic pistol. Originally manufactured by Ludwig Lowe & Company, which would later become Deutsches Waffen- und Munitionsfabriken, or DWM for short. Produced from 1893 until 1902, nearly 3,100 examples of the Borchardt C93 would be finished. Chambered in 7.65 by 25mm Borchardt, this cartridge would later be the basis for 7.63 by 25 Mauser, a cartridge that the C96 Mauser was built around. The Borchardt pistol was marketed by Georg Luger for both commercial and civilian use. Interestingly, the US Navy tested the C93 as early as 1894, being impressed with its rate of fire in addition to its accuracy. The US Navy would ultimately send the C93 Borchardt packing, stating that it was unwieldy when firing because of its near vertical grip and far too expensive to produce. The Swiss would conclude the exact same thing when testing the Borchardt pistol, reporting their findings directly to Georg Luger and Hugo Borchardt. While Georg Luger made note of the platform's issues, Borchardt was unwilling to change his design. With this, DWM would appoint Georg to improve upon the C93 Borchardt. Georg would implement a shorter cartridge, 7.65 by 21mm Parabellum, known today as 30 Luger. This would tremendously decrease the length and width of the toggle mechanism, allowing for a much more compact pistol. Georg, in addition to this, would use a far more angular grip, that being one of the chief complaints of the Borchardt. His pistol, as you might guess, would become the Luger. This to me is the most fascinating part of the Borchardt C93. Hugo Borchardt was stubborn with his design, unwilling to let it advance, so another man did it for him. Lo and behold, one of the most produced and infamous handguns of all time, the Luger. The last model 1893 Borchardt that went to auction sold for $15,000. The C93 Borchardt not only holds the distinction of being the first successful semi-automatic pistol, but the predecessor to an iconic, influential piece of history, the Luger. I hope you have enjoyed today's video. Again, if you disagree with anything I have said, or have a question, please feel free to drop it down in the comments. I am no expert and never claim to be. A like is greatly appreciated, and we hope to see you again on Tipton Bros.